On a crisp Tuesday, October morning in rural St. Catherine, 9-year-old Marvin woke to the sound of wind whispering through the coconut trees and the distant rumble of thunder. He lived with his mother Lorna, his father Carl, and his grandfather Papa Ken in a warm, modest home nestled on a hillside in Guy's Hill. It was no ordinary morning. The community, the country, the whole world was buzzing with uneasy tension. The impending arrival of Hurricane Melissa, a monster storm, now a Category 5 hurricane with sustained winds near 160 miles per hour, set to strike Jamaica within the next 24 hours. The warnings were stark. Torrential rainfall up to 30 inches in some places, life-threatening landslides, and potentially catastrophic flooding. Throughout the house, his mother was busy. She checked their emergency supplies, QC'd his father's work, and made sure everything was doubly secured. His father Carl was downstairs, stacking sandbags at strategic points in case of flooding. Marvin felt a knot of excitement and fear. He'd heard of storms, had gone through Beryl last year, but everyone said this was a once-in-a-lifetime storm, wickeder than Hurricane Gilbert. But what he felt most was concern for someone else, old Maas Ezekiel. Maas Ezekiel lived in a weather-worn house further up the steep hillside from Marvin's home. He was a friend to the family and a beloved uncle figure to Marvin. Despite his age and limited mobility, Maas Ezekiel maintained his dignity and independence in that dilapidated house surrounded by mango trees and wild bougainvillea. Marvin's grandpa, Papa Ken, often visited him, and together they shared stories of the good old days. That morning, Marvin looked out the window and saw clouds folding in. The palm fronds bent. The air smelled of overripe earth and pre-storm humidity. Marvin's gut told him, "Go check on Uncle Ezekiel." And, without a word, he slipped on his water boots, grabbed a small flashlight, and screeched out of the yard. The rain had been a steady drizzle, but the wind was already singing. Marvin's heart pounded as he climbed the hill to Maas Ezekiel's house. The news had advised everyone to hunker down and stay put, to go to shelters, or to evacuate. Yet Marvin thought, Maas Ezekiel is home alone. What if the house falls down on him? What if he takes sick and can't call for help? What if there's a landslide and the house slide down the hill with him? He could not chance either scenario that clouded his young mind. As he rounded the last bend and found the house's veranda light flickering, Maas Ezekiel's silhouette was visible in the front room. Marvin called earnestly, "Maas Ezekiel! It's me, Marvin!" The old man opened the door, cane in hand, and gave the boy a gentle but worried smile. "Marvin? What you doing up here? You should be inside, safe with your family. Your father know you come out the yard?" "I know, Maas Ezekiel," Marvin whispered, "but I'm worried about you. The storm Melissa is coming, you know. It's a big storm. I wanted to check on you to make sure you don't want to come to the house like Mommy and Daddy and Grandpa told you to." Ezekiel's eyes looked heavy. "I saw. Me okay phenomenon, Marvin, but to tell you the truth, I'm having second thoughts. Because, according to what I'm saying on the radio, this storm sound dread. And the house no so sturdy, you know." Without hesitation, Marvin interjected, "Then come to the house. You know we had room. I would be happy if we can all be safe together, Maas Ezekiel." Maas Ezekiel feigned hesitation, but quickly nodded and acquiesced. He placed a few things into a bag, turned off the lights, locked his front door, and together they started the descent down the rocky, narrow footpath towards Marvin's home. The wind had picked up and the rain tapped like small pebbles on the mango leaves ahead. Halfway down the hillside, the situation shifted. A big guinea tree at the edge of the path, its roots loosened from years of erosion and the days-long steady drizzle of rain and intermittent winds, groaned. Suddenly, With a crash, it gave way, blocking the path with a tangle of branches and his heavy trunk. Maas Ezekiel froze, and Marvin tightly grabbed his arm. Uncle Ezekiel, stay calm, Marvin whispered, despite the pounding in his chest. Going back was not an option, as the steep path was now too slick for Maas Ezekiel to traverse with his limited mobility. The only way forward was going down the hill through a shortcut that Marvin knew, a narrower route, and the wind and rain were growing stronger by the second. Back at home, Marvin's mother Lorna realized her son was missing. She called out, "Marvin!" She looked at the open door, then, in panic, called her husband. "Carl! Marvin gone!" After a quick powwow, they concluded he probably went up to Maas Ezekiel's as he'd repeatedly expressed his worries about the old man being alone during the hurricane. Carl's heart dropped. He grabbed his cutlass, flashlight, raincoat, ran to call a few neighbors, and told his wife, "Don't worry, we're gonna find them." The storm bands were now rolling in. The wind rattled the windows, and the treetops floundered. He hurried up the hill with 2 neighbors, while 4 others headed toward the shortcut that also led up to Maas Ezekiel's house. Back on the footpath, Marvin supported Maas Ezekiel as best he could, helping him to move step by step. The rain was now heavy, sheet-like, reducing visibility. The wind seemed to swirl around them, a fierce voice on the hillside. Marvin said, "We'll make it, Uncle Ezekiel. Just follow me." With one last push, they reached a sheltered spot, a ledge that offered them momentary solace. They took a brief break, then resumed their descent inch by precarious inch, until finally they saw the houses in the distance. Suddenly, a ripple occurred, a small slip of earth on the hillside above, a loud rumble, and rocks tumbled down the slope and smashed across the path ahead. At that moment, the neighbors who took the alternate route heard Marvin's voice calling faintly, "Help! Help!" They followed the sound until they found Maas Ezekiel leaning on Marvin, both soaked and exhausted. They rushed to get them down the hillside securely, while one called Carl and the others to tell them they had found them and they should return to the house. Inside the house, Lorna wrapped her arms around Marvin while his dad lovingly admonished him. Maas Ezekiel was guided to the living room, undressed, seated on a chair, stopped with bay rum and bundled under a blanket. Outside the windows, the winds howled, the house shook, but inside, safe and dry, the family huddled together. Marvin, breathless, said, "I knew Uncle Ezekiel might get trapped in a landslide, and I couldn't just wait for that to happen." Papa Ken, who couldn't join the search, but had hustled to get Maas Ezekiel some dry clothes, looked at Marvin proudly, but admonished him for sneaking out of the house. "You did right, my boy, but don't do that again." His father Carl told him he was proud that he chose to exercise some of the initiative he taught him to take, but he'd chosen the worst time for his first adventure. Maas Ezekiel thanked everyone and profusely apologized on Marvin's behalf. For the next hours, they listened as Hurricane Melissa roared overhead. Winds over 100 miles per hour, torrents of rain, flooding, power outages, landslides reported in other parishes. The storm, slow-moving and powerful, hung over the island like a lazy, dark giant. Wednesday morning dawned. The wind slackened, the rain became gentle, and they finally opened the door to assess outside. In the yard, trees were splayed about, their trunks smashed. The hillside had slipped in small places where Trees had been slashed and burned for coal, but their home stood, no major damages. In the aftermath, the community rallied together. Carl and the neighbors proceeded to clear fallen limbs and got about the business of clearing the community road and assessing the damages to each other's properties. Marvin became a hero in his community because the pieces of zinc on Maas Ezekiel's housetop had taken flight to parts unknown, and he would have been totally exposed to the elements during the hurricane with a very low chance of survival. That evening, as they ate, Marvin sat next to Maas Ezekiel on the veranda, looking up at the hills and listening to the dripping leaves. Maas Ezekiel patted his shoulder and said, "Marvin, you saved my life, and I thank you. You are a brave young man, and you're gonna grow up to be a strong, important man." Marvin smiled shyly. "I just wanted you to be safe from the Hurricane Melissa, Maas Ezekiel." And in the heart of rural St. Catherine, as Jamaica began recovery from Hurricane Melissa, a little boy learned what courage, friendship, and community really meant.